you've recruited me. Now can you keep me? We talked a little bit yesterday about this, and it's a difficult conversation to talk about, isn't it? So this is a little bit about, onboarding, those first 90 days. We talked a lot about DEI yesterday, and I've certainly seen, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the people kind of reducing in DEI. So some of these people losing their jobs, maybe moving to like candidate employee engagement type jobs. And we're seeing like a bit of a change in DEI. And we just discussed that yesterday around inclusion, DEI practices, what that might look like going forward. And so let's try and navigate that in the best way we can. So that's what I wanted to talk about. My thoughts on it are that, for me, building a company, it needs to be, I'm all about being inclusive, so you've worked really hard to find people and stuff. And for me, like the way I find folks for ourselves and for our clients, I mean, I leave like no stone unturned, right? Like I think the best companies look everywhere, right? Like you want to look in as wide a place as possible, as wide a talent pool as possible to find folks. And then I think, then you have probably, by definition, I think the larger the talent pool, the more diverse it's likely to be in terms of thought and background and all of those kind of things. And then I think you can make a better hiring decision. But once you've done that, what are you going to do? Because it's maybe, it's hard to find people. I think maybe it's even harder to keep them. And I think a lot of companies, they miss it. You see, it's like, right, with the interview process is done. And then, I spoke to someone the other day that we didn't hire, a friend of mine. And I haven't even got my laptop. It's like week 2, or there's been no onboarding. And suddenly, I know you've talked about it a lot, there's that first 90 days, right? It just sets the tone for that relationship, whether it's going to be successful or not. And I think that's the hidden cost of recruiting. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then the inclusion stuff, again, it's like you want to be in a company where and again, this is different for some people, because some people like to be open and share themselves and all of that stuff. Others don't. So I know there's, but I think the environment has to be conducive to people being able to be themselves. I hate the way everyone's like talks about bringing your authentic self to work, right? It's overused, I think, because I still think that really what people mean is bring your authentic self to work as long as you believe what I believe. Otherwise, I don't really want to hear. And I think I see that quite a bit. Certainly, like when contentious.
I would say, yeah. I mean, aside from, I think our own environment, I think is, I'm not going to say it's utopia, but I think that we've definitely created an authentic, inclusive environment. But I'd like to go back to what you said, because I think, it's like, I think ultimately, we are in talent acquisition. So, when people think of our function, we're, you can kind of think of it, and I've spent a lot of time with marketers, so I think of the funnel, right? And I think of our job. Oftentimes we get reduced to that top of funnel, right? We're there to, it's in our name, right? Search and acquire. I think when you're talking about, long-term success, inclusion, belonging, being a part of that, I don't think that ever should not be part of the conversation for anyone coming into an organization, because everyone struggles, whether they admit it or not, with imposter syndrome. We've done a lot of research around this recently. When a new executive comes into an organization, they're learning 10 to 15 new technology tools. They're learning ways in an organization that they've never had to navigate before. There's internal norms that they are not familiar with yet. And it's extremely difficult and extremely challenging to turn an outsider into an insider. And ultimately, that should be part of our roles as well. And the way that we do that, and I advocate for this a lot, is, yes, we should be out there looking for people. But I think, and I advocate for this, and I hope to see our profession moving in this direction, where we are involved in really defining the scope of a role based on what the market, first what the market can offer. So oftentimes we're given a job description, we go out and find it. That really, I think, progressively thinking about, this next wave of how do you really, and we'll talk about DEI. For me, equity still belongs in the equation. building an equitable process starts with looking at, kind of institutional behaviors. And it starts with, what are you looking for in a role, right? Especially at the executive level. What are the competencies that you're looking for? Let's talk about, people in your team. What's successful? Why did someone leave? Was it because X, Y, and Z? It could be, well, they didn't really, understand the organization quickly enough. They didn't spend enough time trying to get to know their peers. I mean, we've gotten that feedback, right? It's rarely about their technical skills. It's a lot of times around those, executive functioning competencies around, how they integrate into an organization ultimately. So I think we start there. Then we go out to market and we can actually start evaluating people on how they're going to, start to integrate into your organization. And that can happen during the interview process, specifically if you pick people in the interview process that are going to be ultimately invested in that person's long-term success. So I often counsel my hiring managers, you want people to evaluate the person as part of the interview process, but you also want them to have skin in the game so that if they were part of their interview process, when they come on board, they're now part of that person's success because they put their thumbprint on that hire. And I think
Yeah, that's true.
if you build it from the beginning that this is a continuum and not I find people and we throw them over the fence, like that should not be the case. Then you can start to you use that evaluation process, and then you can use that for your onboarding, and you can remind people, hey, we talked about the last time you hired someone, it was really difficult for them to be successful because they didn't have enough time with, the most key important stakeholders. So how are we, right? And talent acquisition should be a part of that. How do we make sure, right, that we can do this handoff and hold you accountable, hold all of us accountable, right, to these things that we know to be true.
Yeah.
And then you create the conduit and the infrastructure for talent acquisition to be much more than just the search party, right, for the missing person. And you become accountable for success, and then we can hold ourselves more accountable, for that longer term, executive, what we call executive success. Ultimately, that has to get passed off to the business, right? We can't hold on forever, even though we have the longest memories in recruiting. Like, we remember every conversation, we remember every promise that was made. Ultimately, our new hires have to walk, fly, run on their own, and their hiring managers do as well. But I do think that we should be thinking about our role. We talk about this a lot as a much more inclusive, empathetic, structure that does ultimately land someone in an inclusive organization where they do feel like they belong and where they had an equitable process. I don't think DEI goes away. I think you take the lens of DEI and you put it through your entire process, and you just make sure that everybody is getting, an opportunity to be considered for the right roles. And so the last thing I'll say on that is we really need to reduce our dependency on, job descriptions are really important. They create, a framework, but I do think we need to increase our dependency on understanding what success looks like and then holding people accountable for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, what I think about that, I mean, obviously we are external, so we're advisors and advising a firm that's hiring. And I think the good thing with being an external party, an advisor, is, and certainly the best people in our field, I think you need to be asking the right questions, probing, having a point of view, challenging the person that is hiring, and doing a really thorough job at being a consultant. Because I think too many folks, if they're supporting a hiring manager, whether they're internal or external, it's like yeah.
I love that you said. I thought you were going to say challenge. I think so many times, and I love that you said challenging the person that's hiring. We often put candidates into that challenge or challenged environment, and almost, I wouldn't say adversarial, but I do think that sometimes we do need to challenge and sometimes it's not the hiring manager, it's just the institutional process. Why do you do things this way?
Well, it's
Right.
like it could even just be. I mean, for me, it's like, my job, our job, is finding the right people for the right jobs, right people for the right organization. There's a place for everyone in this world, right? And for me, like, the real skill and I think the way we can measure our success over the long term is, like, have we found the right people for the right jobs in the right companies? And to do that, we need to understand the jobs, the cultures, the people. And we're advisors. Like, I don't work in these firms. I don't work at Google. I don't work at whatever firm we might be hiring for, but I am working with them, and I need to ask the right questions, and they need to engage with us. Because really, I see my job in finding people. Yeah, I mean, we're amazing at that, right? But it's actually engaging with them and telling the story. And I want to be telling the right story. I don't want to be telling like, we think we're like this, but when you join, it's nothing like it, because that doesn't work. People fall out. So I want to be getting the right information from people. And maybe it's a few people, right? Because everyone has a certain view. Probably, you're looking at your culture through rose-tinted glasses, and you think it's incredible. But maybe, you speak to a few people. I might speak to a few people. That's why I think for candidates, there's so much value in meeting a lot of people, because you can ask them the same questions, and the truth will be somewhere in the middle, and you'll be able to make probably a better decision at what it might be really like to work there. Because you do hear a lot. It's like, how's it going? Well, not quite as described, or well, it's not really quite like. I hear that. I've heard that so many times over the years, and like, it's ultimately. And I spoke with a client of mine about this like last week, and it's we will tell a story, hopefully it's the right story, and then someone goes in the interview process, and then really the story comes from whoever's interviewing them, right? So the people that are employed in this company. And they need to be giving an honest account of the role, the challenges, what it's like to work here. Because for me, you want to go in with your eyes wide open. And it might be like, hey, come work here. It's really bad. Our processes are dreadful. We'd love you to come and sort us out. Or it could be, look, you know what, we're really good, and we just want to incrementally improve. So whatever the story, I think I'd really advocate for hiring managers, or if you're interviewing candidates, for me, I love just kicking off, like maybe you kick off the first 10 minutes. You're like, let me tell you a bit about what it's like to work here. And you communicate your culture, and then it gives people a good opportunity to think through, is this for me? Is it not? Because when you come in like eyes open, and it is what you've described, you're on a really good footing then.
I know our stats are way better than this, and just a little plug for really great executive search firms, but it's what we do well. And I always, I believe that we are a risk assessment, risk mitigation practice, right? We are here to reduce the risk of a hire, that doesn't ultimately work out, regardless of whether I believe that we've really created a gold standard for what success looks like, right? Because success is measured individually by each organization for the role that they hired and what their expectations were. But we do know, I think there's a statistic out there, carte blanche, more than 50% of new executives, fail within the first 12 to 18 months. Again, not our statistic. I think we are in a much higher success rate because of the work that we do. And I think part of that language is saying, in the first 12 to 18 months, it's extremely hard for executives to be successful because of all of these things that ultimately can derail success. And I think part of our role, and what I think most modern advisory firms are working towards, is to mitigate those risks, and is to take the whole of the process to create, a map for someone coming into an organization to be successful. And coming with the stats and facts, right? You can't really argue with the fact that, there's going to be new ways of doing something in your organization. There's going to be, that people have failed when they do X, Y, and Z. And knowing that there's a high rate of failure should encourage people to create more, a stronger, stickier, engagement with new employees.
Yeah, I also think as well, like at the seniors, the level that we recruit at, exec level, it also takes a while, whether people want to admit this or not, to mentally disengage from the last one. And like, you've been in a role for a while, it's full on, you've left for whatever reason, you've suddenly joined a new firm. Mentally, like, you're probably still in that other firm for a while. you know, and it
I've
takes.
advocated for this throughout my career, like give people the time off that they need in between roles to decompress, to detox, whatever your word is, because I think that's also a hidden cost. And, we've talked about this as well. One of the ways that we think that people can be successful is to have an executive coach to help
Yeah,
them maybe process those things that happened, that they're holding on to, because we are hiring people for the things that they did before, but you're also trying to harness creativity and transformation, and it's extremely hard. It's a crutch, right, to go to what worked before. And so it's a
yeah.
paradox, right? You want the playbook, but you also want them to be able to call an audible in the middle of the game.
Yeah, and also you want them to come in with a full battery. You don't want to, like, it's like driving in like an electric car and it's like, oh no, I've got to go charge it, like, 2 minutes in. So yeah, you're right. You're hiring someone for like historic. Well, historic. I mean, a lot of
Came
people
with the
say that.
playbook, like you know how to win the
Yeah,
game,
yeah,
but
yeah.
now
Or
you
you
need
know,
players.
you got the playbook, but also you're like looking for potential too. So you're like made a judgment and stuff. But to your point, and also to my point, is like you want someone to come in like on fully charged, mentally in the game, ready to rock. And then you need to hook them up with the right people, make sure they have the right relationships, make sure you're on the same side as them. And then you got a good chance then. I see a lot of folks, they come in, they've jumped straight in. Whoever's hired them is just obviously expecting big things because they've come in and all of this. But I think there's some decompression, some recharging to be done. I mean, I'm not true of everyone, but I'd say generally that's
Yeah.
probably true.
I think this is just, it's not a knock on our profession, but we're often seen as, cheerleaders, right? It's kind of like we also need to continue to evolve our role um, as coaches and as advisors. And I think we do a really good job of this, to talk about the potential risks. It's like no one wants to talk about the end at the beginning. And we talked about this yesterday too. Um, but there's a life cycle. We have to acknowledge the life cycle, right? This employee is coming in. At some point, they are going. There's a cycle to their employment. Um, we're so caught up in the beginning, and I think that's a good thing. But I also think it's important to you know, talk about, we want the road to continue. We don't want anyone walking off a cliff and not knowing where they're going, and kind of using the map analogy, trying to find their way in the dark with a flashlight. And that's oftentimes what coming into an organization can feel like. And we have the opportunity to slow down, and there are people, that are willing to help. It's about assembling, the right team of Avengers to make sure that, the people that you're hiring can harness their superpowers. I do feel like it's just we need to talk about it more. Do you agree that it's part of our job to talk a little bit about the potential, you know, pitfalls and landmines that new hires can walk into with our clients? Like, do you see that as our part of our evolving role?
Yeah, I think the best search consultants. I mean, it starts with you have to have a good relationship with your client, hiring manager, whatever, because some firms treat search consultants differently. Some are all in. You're working with the CEO or whoever it might be, and they're valuing you, and they regard you as an expert in your field. They think of you as expert status. And then once you're, if you're viewed in that way by your client, you can absolutely. I mean, you can say anything, and you can really do a very good job at advising because, we get to see loads of different companies, and I get to see how people do it really well, how they don't. And that's one of the benefits of being in a consultancy is you work with lots of different customers across the globe, and you can see what good looks like and what's worked and what's not. And I can use that and advise and all of that stuff. Some companies they keep you a little bit at arm's length, and you don't have as much face time, and it's a little bit harder to advise and engage. So so it varies a little, but the best folks in our industry are able to really get to a point where they're really relied on as an advisor, and then you can do your best work as a search consultant and advise in the right way, not overstepping, because there are there's HR, there's TA, there's many like different stakeholders that we as search consultants have to work with, and so you have to kind of make sure that you're navigating it in the right way. But absolutely, I mean, most, if not all of the clients that I work with and have worked with, are very, very receptive and are asking, what should I do? What does good look like? Does this person even exist? So, I think for us, like if you're in our position, you need to have a real good point of view, and you need to, there's just so much data and stuff and information around. And I think it's our job to translate that into what it means for this particular search and this particular person and things like that. So more and more, like, that's for me what sets us apart from others.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it all, I love the book Catch 22. I think we all know what Catch 22, right, is, but the premise of the Catch 22 is no matter what's happening, it all comes back to the center, right? It all comes back to the same event. And I think regardless of what we're talking about, the nucleus of this is finding, not just the right person based on assumptions, right? Because we can assume that we found the perfect person based on everything that is written now and everything the hiring manager has said. The best search consultants will challenge that if they have an inkling that even if they find that perfect person, that they may not make it in that environment. And the best search consultants, I think challenge those managers to be really thoughtful about the environment that they're walking talent into. Because if it is
Yeah.
challenging, like you said, some people love running into into those challenging situations, but they need to be set up for success. They need to understand, everyone needs to understand this takes time to build and all of those things. I think, we can create a much more, that feeling of belonging when you get into an organization by setting people up in the right way. And I think we can do that through the search process. But I think we over index on certain parts of that funnel. And I think it's strengthening all of those conversations, every gate that we have to pass through, double checking, triple checking, and making sure, that we are ultimately walking, somebody into an environment where they can be successful. And then again, as part of our evolving role, holding people or helping people hold themselves accountable for that person's success. And I think that we have a lot of tools to do that are new and different. But it doesn't change the nucleus, which is we're all trying to do the same thing, which is get, someone into a role and be successful.
Absolutely. And often, and most of the time, people that are really quite happy in a role, like we're headhunting folks. I mean, we don't advertise jobs. These are people that are, leading teams, leading companies, not necessarily expecting our phone call. So there's also mentally a real shift. We talked about like kind of disengaging from the last one. I mean, they're like maybe mentally in the game and they've done the strategy plan for the next 3 years, and suddenly Jamie calls and it's like, wow, yeah, that's, So I think also really trying to get hiring managers, and I spend a bit of time doing this, is just appreciating that it takes the candidate a while to get into their process. They're not going to automatically be like, oh my God, I'm in. You have to just, you go slow. Well, I'm not too slow, but you take the time, give people a bit of space, give people information, and it's just a way of, you need to get them in and, and then just transition them into.
I mean, this is a whole different conversation. Or I could go. I remember a senior HR leader asking me like why someone wasn't fully engaging, and I said because they haven't really become a candidate yet. And they said, when will they become a candidate? I said, maybe never. We assume, right, the language that we use for search, we try to imprint it into that kind of world where people are automatically raising their hands wanting to be candidates. But there are some people will have the conversation and never really become a candidate. And so it's our job to continue to create a process and experience that ultimately can convert that person into a hire. But they may not ever identify as a candidate.
No. And often these are these are the folks that people want, the high performers. Their current firm will do all they can. They're being paid extremely well. Whatever, they've got a great thing, but there's something. There's always, I don't know, maybe they want the next opportunity or whatever. Timing, a lot of the time. I think a lot of recruiting is about timing. And but if you're hiring and you're looking for the best folks, or you're hiring for a job that is so people are in demand, right? There's not many people to do your job. They're all employed. you have to deal with them in a different way to if your job is in demand, where you're advertising and 500 people apply. You should treat everyone the same, but people do treat them differently. So, but I think if you treat them like your best customer, can't go too wrong.
Everyone should be treated the same. We treat everybody the same. How people want to put themselves through a process, I'm very appreciative, for everyone that goes through a process, whether we find them or they find us. Some people just behave differently, and that's okay, right? Behavior is an indication of a lot of different things, and that's where we are experts in understanding motivation and understanding what those behaviors might indicate. And sometimes, we don't know, right? We are walking the path. We don't have the flashlight in front of us. It's pretty dark. We don't know the road in front of us. And I think that it takes a lot of courage sometimes to be a search consultant, because you are, you don't want to overpromise, right? All you can sometimes say, or I think the best of us, what we try to really, or the best of the folks that I've worked with, are optimistic and are willing to go the distance and are honest when, you just run out of runway. And that's okay too, right? That creates a whole different path for somebody else. But ultimately, we talk about slowing down sometimes. If you push something too far down a hill, whether it's, you make an offer too quickly or you make an extraordinary offer, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's your best hire, right? So you've got to be really in tune and really attuned to what's happening in the process. And if you can stay attuned to every step along the way, I do think you have a higher chance of where we started, right? Like, I've hired them now,
Now what?
Now what? Are they going to stay?
Are they going to stay? And let me just finish off with my point, a point of, we spend our careers.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I think, I'm almost 20 years as well, like you. And so spent my career headhunting people from companies and trying to move them from one to another. And happy people are way harder to move.
Sure.
So, it pays to make sure that your team are happy and you're there for them and you're providing them the things you need to provide. And to your point, maybe there's they're with you for a few years. There's a natural cycle to it. Maybe they're with you their whole career. People are different. But if you invest time in your team, then I think it gives everyone a good opportunity.
I will also say, I think in this market, in the last few years, there's been a lot of thrash, a lot of promises, and a lot of crash and burns. Let's be honest, right? It's been a tough market in some sectors. I think it's also really hard to move people who have gotten really smart at what questions to ask. And so they may not be the happiest. They may not even be in a full-time role, and they're not necessarily that easy to move. And I think that we need to become more aware of that value proposition for everybody, because I think, especially senior leaders who have seen some things in their careers are really, can be really smart and really sophisticated. I think everyone should be sophisticated in the questions that they ask. Because I think happiness is subjective. I think a lot of people who've become really sophisticated to making moves, like maybe they've made a move and it was really great. Maybe they've made a move and it burned a little bit. I think there's a lot more discernment in every candidate these days that I work with. And I think that's really smart. And so I would encourage everybody to be discerning. Happy people are hard to move. People that have had, fool me once, shame on you. Like, they're not going to take that same call again. So I think people who are really more in the process or really sophisticated about what they want in their career are the hardest to bring over.
That's true. And there's so much information out there now, content about good experiences, bad. You can find out. I mean, there's so much now. So, candidates and just people generally are much better educated now about all of these different things than they were 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah. It's so different now, right?
It's so different. You can't beat someone over the head with a paycheck anymore, right? Like, it's just kind of...
That should be the caption. You cannot beat... That is exactly what you just articulated exactly what I was trying to say, which is people are very sophisticated and ask really great questions and are really digging deeper into impact, into culture, into opportunity, into leadership. they're incredible in terms of their sophisticated, sleuthing skills. And it's our job. And again, I think that's where transparency, kind of going back to this idea of, recruiting is at an interesting point and as a profession where we have to be transparent, we have to be forthcoming. Like, that's how we build trust and credibility. It's our job to continue to evolve. It's our job to get, again, we go back to the original, question of what makes people stay. And I think it's all of the things we've learned, even in the world of DEI. There's so much data around inclusion and belonging, shared experience. Like, this is a whole probably other topic. So if we want to cut this off and leave it for next time, let's do it. But the data is there. It's clear.
Done. Right, let's leave that. Let's leave that one for the next podcast. Let's leave that.
Leave it.